Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about what's happening in the Chinese economy, and specifically to talk about the growing trade war between China and the USA. If you've been following the channel, you'll know that I recently posted a video talking about the fact that Donald Trump, following his election win, came out and said that in response to the growing drug problem in the USA, the fentanyl problem, he was going to apply additional tariffs of 25% against Mexico and China and 10% across the board against all Chinese imports. And those tariffs would be on top of the existing tariffs, and the USA recently imposed a 100% tariff against Chinese electric vehicle imports. And following on from this announcement, the Joe Biden administration recently announced that it was imposing additional export curbs on 140 Chinese companies involved in chip manufacture. So an additional 140 Chinese businesses will be added to the US entity list, and the entity list is basically a list of businesses that are restricted in terms of export. So any US business that wants to export to those companies has to receive a special license. They have to apply for a license, and they may or may not receive it. And this is all part of an ongoing program by the US authorities to restrict China's development of artificial technology chips, which it says China could then use in military applications and also potentially, therefore, could pass them on to Russia. So there is a military and defense background behind all of these restrictions. However, of course, the problem that these Chinese companies have is that they're not just producing chips for use in military applications. They're producing huge amounts of chips for a variety of different applications. And the US export restrictions are restricting the amount of business that these companies can actually be involved in, and also restricting them in terms of developing their own technologies. Now, as you might expect, China isn't particularly happy about these new export restrictions. And Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Lin Juan said such behaviour undermined the international economic trade order and disrupted global supply chains. And he went on to say that China will take measures to safeguard the rights and interests of its firms. And China's Commerce Ministry described the US restrictions as a clear example of economic coercion and non-market practices in a statement published on its official website. And China has now announced that it's banned the export of gallium, germanium and antimony to the USA. Now, I wouldn't blame you if you were sitting there at this point thinking, gallium, germanium and antimony? Never heard of them. Who cares whether China has banned their export to the USA or not? But these are critical minerals that are used in the semiconductor industry and also in a variety of different military applications. And China is the world's biggest producer of all three of these critical minerals. So here we go, it's time for a chemistry lesson. Can you remember your periodic table? Can you think back and remember any of the elements? Well, I had an acronym that helped me to learn the first 20, and it was Hahilibeb Kanofna Namgal Sipsicle Arka. So that was basically the abbreviation of the first 20 of the periodic table. But unfortunately, I never memorised beyond number 20, so I don't know anything about gallium, germanium, or antimony. Gallium comes in at number 31 on the periodic table and has the chemical symbol Ga. It is a soft silvery metal that has a low melting point. In fact, it will melt on a human hand, and is found in trace amounts in zinc ores and bauxite. And its main form of production is a byproduct of aluminium processing, and 90% of the global supply comes from China. Germanium, which has the chemical symbol Ge, is number 32 on the periodic table and is a lustrous, hard, brittle, greyish-white metal similar in appearance to silicon. Germanium has a high index of refraction and low optical dispersion, and as a result it's used as a core part of optical fibres, which account for around 35% of the total global consumption. However, it is also used in infrared optics and in the semiconductor industry. China controls around 60% of the global supply of germanium and holds a dominant position over the world's supply chain. Antimony has the chemical symbol Sb and ranks at number 51 on the periodic table. So congratulations if you learnt your periodic table beyond number 50. I certainly didn't. I was only at number 20, but you're obviously a chemical expert. Antimony is another silver metal that is used in military applications such as ammunition, infrared missiles, nuclear weapons, and night vision goggles. Around 50% of the global supply of antimony is mined in China. However, China also specialises in refining antimony, and the output from countries such as Australia, Bolivia, and Kazakhstan is actually refined in China. So China is in a very strong position in terms of that global supply chain. The USA does not have any active mining for antimony, and in 2023 consumed 23,000 tonnes, which compares to its current stockpile of around 1,000 tonnes. So the USA is a net importer. It's dependent on that supply coming from China. So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video because I think what's happening right now in terms of the trade between the USA and China is really quite concerning. What we've seen over the course of the past few weeks is that Donald Trump, who takes over as the president on the 20th of January, has said that he's going to apply additional tariffs against all Chinese imports. And one of the reasons that he's doing that, he says that it's because of the war on drugs. But one of the reasons is because the USA is a net importer. Its balance of trade with China is hugely negative. It imports around 3 times more than it exports to China. And so therefore, if he can apply tariffs against all of those goods, the theory is that it will increase the price and therefore make US goods more attractive and competitive, and potentially is beneficial for US industry. But the problem that you get when you start applying tariffs against imports is that it's going to lead to retaliatory action. And what we've seen in today's video is that the threat of the additional tariffs from Donald Trump, and also the further restrictions that have been applied by the Joe Biden regime, he's now put another 140 companies onto the entity list, which takes it to around 600 Chinese companies that are now on that list. And what that means is that any US company that wants to export to those businesses has to apply for a special license. And the US authorities obviously have the option of turning down that application. They can say no to any of those exports. So it's restricting the amount of goods that can go from the USA to China. And what China is importing from those US companies are high-tech products. These are things that China is not in a position to be able to produce itself yet. And the USA is trying to restrict all of those different high-tech products because firstly, it doesn't want China to have access to them. And secondly, it doesn't want China to be able to replicate them, to develop its own technology using those products to try to break them down and work out how they've been constructed and potentially start competing with what's happening in the USA. And the official reason why the US has imposed these restrictions is to prevent all of this tech being used in military applications. That's why it's doing it. However, the problem from China's point of view is that those things are not just being used for military applications, they're being used in lots of different commercial applications. And so the restriction of those exports is hurting all of those Chinese businesses. They can't produce all of the things they want to be able to export their own products. And what we've seen today is that China is now retaliating. And what it's retaliating with is rare metals. These are critical minerals that the USA needs in order to keep producing those high-speed chips that are being made by companies like Nvidia. If they can't get access to those critical minerals, then there will be a problem in terms of further developing that technology. So what we are seeing here is a vicious circle. The USA is trying to stop Chinese imports for a variety of different reasons, some trade, some military, and some just to restrict the technology. And China is now retaliating by saying, okay, if you're going to apply those restrictions on us, we're going to stop you from being able to source things that you need to take your technology to the next level. And so what we're seeing is a restriction of global trade. And this is going to be bad news for both the Chinese economy and also the US economy. And if we see this continuing over the course of the next 3 to 6 to 12 months during Donald Trump's first year in presidency, this potentially could cause major problems for both of those economies. And as these two economies represent around 43% of the total global GDP, then it potentially could cause the global economy to start slowing down. And that's the problem, I think, with trade wars, is that nobody's a winner. Everybody loses in a trade war because there's always going to be retaliatory action. Donald Trump can't impose tariffs against China and expect China to do nothing in response. They are obviously going to do things that they believe will hurt the US economy. And what they're doing is restricting the supply of things that are simply not available anywhere else. China holds almost a monopolistic position on the export of the 3 critical minerals that we've talked about in today's video, and they potentially could widen these restrictions to other critical minerals where they also have a very strong position. So the overall summary of today's video is that what we've seen over the course of the past few weeks is the USA has been increasing the restrictions on Chinese trade. China is now retaliating by restricting things that the USA needs. And if this trade war continues to mushroom, then it's going to be detrimental to the Chinese economy, the US economy, and also the global economy. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, you found it useful, informative, and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end, and here's something to put a smile on your face.